I've been thinking about my sixth grade social studies teacher from 1968 when I attended Lord Little Elementary School in Wilmington, Delaware. In my sixth grade social studies class in 1968, Mr. Carey spoke of this one single principle, of the American identity that rises to make, or I should say, rose to make our nation the example of freedom that the free world aspired to be. It was an idea that he implied was well worth dying for. And he explained that this American blessing was the thing that distinguishes us from the totalitarian lifestyle of people who lived in Russia and China, where tyrants rule unquestioned. He talked about every city in America, every town in America, and each of them with their independent news stations, independent reporting, independent broadcasting license, all independently scooping with their own teams of reporters, independently working the stories from the perspectives and the observations they're able to make. Broadcasters, the owners of them, were limited to the number of licenses that they would be able to have. And the point was to prevent a single voice authoritarian power from dictating some fantasy of what people's lives were and what true freedoms they were enjoying. Until I read his obituary, I never understood how personal these motivations were to protect America. In America in 1968, we began feeling Vietnam would be endless. But in Mr. Carey's classroom in 1968, he spoke of the possible consequences if America failed to push back the communist threat. This was a Chinese proxy war that would expand the ideological territory of a state where no individual rights are respected. Vietnam, he said, was the first domino, and if we lost there, he felt others would swiftly fall. Mr. Carey told us all about what life was like behind the Iron Curtain and the freedoms, specifically the First Amendment, he said in class 5 or 6 decades ago, was what Americans willingly fight and die to preserve. He said that in places like that, tyrants invent the news to feed their people's minds and control their wills. One news voice bringing propaganda and brainwashing came from the state press with stories that were told to either please the tyrant or praise the tyrant. Preventing that for all here in America, Mr. Carey implied, was worth the sacrifice.
There was a generation of Americans who faced down the greatest threats the modern world had ever known. They were young men and women who grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression, only to be called upon to defend civilization itself. They answered that call without hesitation. Fighting in the skies over Europe heaped you on the beaches of the Pacific, upon the unforgiving waters of the Atlantic. Then, when the job was done, they came home. They didn't ask for parades or accolades. They simply put away their uniforms, picked up their tools and their textbooks, and quietly went about the business of building the America we know today. They were ordinary people who, when tested, proved to be truly extraordinary. One of these quiet heroes was a man named Mr. Carey. To the countless students who passed through his government class over the decades, he was simply a dedicated teacher. He was the man at the front of the room who spoke with passion about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the responsibilities of citizenship. He taught with a conviction born not just from books, but from lived experience, though he rarely, if ever, spoke of it. His lessons on freedom were not abstract theories. They were principles he had seen defended at great cost. He never boasted, never hinted at the dangers he had faced. He was just Mr. Carey, shaping young minds. A living testament to a generation defined by profound modesty and an unwavering sense of duty. This quiet demeanor was a hallmark of his generation. The silence Mr. Carey maintained about his wartime service concealed a harrowing past, one marked by the very real and constant dangers faced by the U.S. Navy. He was a survivor of one of the war's tragic, though lesser-known incidents. On the frigid night of January 6, 1944, he was a sailor aboard the USS St. Augustine, a patrol gunboat on escort duty off the coast of Cape May, New Jersey. The sea was a treacherous place. Enemy submarines, nature, human error. In the black of night, under conditions of poor visibility, the unthinkable happened. The American merchant tanker Camas Meadows collided with the much smaller naval vessel. The impact was catastrophic. The St. Augustine, a ship designed for combat, torn apart not by an enemy torpedo, but by a colossal friendly vessel in the dense, dark sea lanes. The collision was swift and brutal. The gunboat sank in minutes, plunging its crew into the icy, churning Atlantic. In the chaos and the darkness, survival was a desperate struggle against the waves. For the men aboard, the war against a foreign enemy was replaced by a primal battle for their lives. It was a stark reminder that in war, danger comes from all directions. For Mr. Carey and his shipmates, the moments that followed were a testament to their resilience and courage. Of the 145 men aboard the USS St. Augustine, only 30 survived the night. The tragedy claimed 115 American sailors, not in a fiery battle with a U-boat, but in a cruel twist of fate while protecting the ships that kept the war effort alive.
Mr. Carey said in places like Russia, people are arrested and convicted by the state with no reasonable opportunity for defense. He said in places like Russia, places like China, loyalty is tested, and the failure to prove it would come with living behind bars. He said that children might attend school and be fed the propaganda that inspires them to turn in their parents to their teachers anytime they see a breach of enthusiasm for the leader. In sixth grade, everybody in America felt safe in Mr. Carey's classroom. And so many in the classroom made remarks like, that certainly couldn't happen here. Until I retired from the Postal Service at the end of April this year, I haven't had much of a relationship with late night television. Now, when I won the state championship for ice hockey in South Carolina, I was the coach of the Porter Gout School, which is where Stephen Colbert graduated. My wife, she parks across the street when she goes to work every day at the medical university. She parks across the street from the building his family donated to the hospital and, of course, built for the hospital here to take care of the community here. So I had some interest in, Stephen just because I know the kinds of people from which he emerged as a student, coaching a team that earned me the Coach of the Year award with 1 win and 10 losses. That's another story. And to have, people who are here in the community that my wife has actually had interactions with, I think, at events where the major donors and the major sponsors and the major influencers in advancing healthcare here in South Carolina have a place. And it has the same name as Stephen. So here's this guy from the neighborhood, let's say, who I'm sort of obligated to give a look. So I watched him for a while. I don't normally stay up late, so it's rare that I ever catch him, but I did start occasionally peeking in because I didn't have to get up in the morning. Last night I was going to give Jimmy Kimmel an opportunity because Jimmy's next, and next thing you know, he's pulled off the air. And all of the people who have licenses in America that depend on the Federal Communications Commission to issue them and to reissue them and to not have them pulled have decided that there's an easy way and that there's a hard way. Now, here, it's not likely people are going to miss Jimmy Kimmel at 11:30 at night, because he's one of the people the president has decided that he shouldn't be on the air anymore. And the other Jimmy's next. And Seth, and boy, endless. And when I'm on the same side as Joe Rogan, Rand Paul, I'm on the same side of Rand Paul on a lot of things post office these days. We have a different approach, we have a different finish, but we have the same understanding of things. And when Ted Cruz starts talking like a mobster so that Americans can hear how our administration sounds. This is Ted Cruz, who in his first interview, when they put a microphone in front of him, when people were slaughtered in school in his state, he didn't get through the first sentence without saying the other party's name. People like that aren't serious. But in this case, we're talking about the fundamental thing that people are willing to die for. There was some confusion about who the good guys and bad guys are. In 1980, there wasn't. I was awarded this trophy as the first ever South Carolina Scholastic Coach of the Year for ice hockey. And having this audience in this unique place with this very young ice hockey sport in a state where, here it's October and it's going to be 90 degrees outside, a state where ice skates are not natural and normal, it's a sport well known to be Canadian. I said that the only time America has ever come together as one have been wars, natural disasters, a moonwalk, and a hockey game. And a bunch of young boys faced the Russian Red Army, the most powerful and strong team in the history of the world. Professional hockey players, conscripted to the service specifically for their whole lives to play hockey. And this young bunch of people, these young boys, fresh out of college mostly, were called on as Americans to put on a uniform. And as Herb Brooks talked about, a letter he got from a woman from Texas, of all places, whose only instruction was for him to beat those communist Russian socialist son of a bitches. Was to beat those Russian socialist son of a bitches. To beat Russia. Because Russia is evil. And here, when I turned on my news last night, I discover we're just behaving like Russia. So I dialed in Jimmy. And I thought I was going to be able to see him because the station here in Charleston isn't owned by Nexstar or Sinclair. But they didn't have it aired. And the story they did, included something about MUSC, but it didn't have anything to do with the Colbert building. I believe he's allowed to call himself whatever he chooses. But last night I dialed in, and a few things came to light. Businesses are not humans. And we can't have limitless owning of our media stations. And in the baby boom generation, those things were understood by their parents and their grandparents and everyone since pretty much 1930, when we stopped allowing children in the factories to work, when we ended the company stores, which was basically indentured servitude, and when we recovered from a great, unimaginable to most in America depression that was the outcome of the Gilded Age. When Rand Paul was talking about the Postal Service, he made some noise about Milton Friedman's theories on how economies should work, but he forgets about the most important part, and that's the chapter where Milton said, you have to live by the golden rule. There are mores in society. We must understand that capitalism isn't the vehicle to get rich. It is a place for competition to advance society. And like a Monopoly game, if you lift up and turn over the lid, there are rules. But we took them all away in the baby boom generation. We took them all away because we didn't want to inhibit the freedom of people to make money. Here's strategic thinking. We have more people in prison than per capita than any other nation on earth. We're sending people in chains to El Salvador and unknown parts in Africa. We're bombing small Venezuelan boats 1,000 miles from our homes, from our borders. That isn't anything that's funny. And in 1996, William Clinton signed the Communication Act into law that was drafted by the tech guys. All the tech guys were Democrats to get the laws they wanted. And they became Republicans to get the morality they needed to see their technocratic dreams come true. If you know anything about Elon Musk, you know that his grandfather was one of the preeminent authors on technocracy, which is to understand that to advance society, you put society in the hands of people who bring the technology. You want to own a nation? Take guns to a place where they've never seen them before. And the people will just die for you. And you can call it manifest destiny, a word which I hadn't heard since fourth grade history, where we were told the Scott Forsman version was. And I don't know if that Scott Forsman version shaped for my community. If you've been a scout executive in a district, you get to go to all the schools and you get to see how they teach. You get to see the things they put up in their walls and what they promote and what their communication is. And if you do it in a place like Beaufort County, South Carolina, You're going to go to a lot of Christian schools. You're going to understand there's a lot of people who are homeschooled. A right Americans earned because the Amish petitioned for it, because for their religious reasons, they didn't need to know anything beyond what 6th grade teaches. Customer at the window. I just turned 60, was working at the Lincoln University post office, and a customer at the window came to the window and said to me, "So now that you're living here," I was living in Newark at the time, he said, "now that you're working here, you think you're going to move closer?" And I said, "Well, I kind of like that 30-minute drive every day. It's through the back roads." And then I considered the fact that this guy's probably never gone faster than a 1-horsepower buggy will take him. Maybe 2 horses. And I said, and I actually never took advantage of it. In Delaware, if you're over 60, you can go to the University of Delaware for free. And I live right there on the campus. And he said, what do you need to know? What do you think you need to learn? And I said, "You think you know everything you need to know?" And he said, "No, absolutely not. But I should by the time I'm your age." And one of the things, boy, hardwired synaptics. It's a beautiful thing.
Friends, colleagues, fellow citizens. In times of uncertainty, it is natural to feel a sense of dread. Our national discourse is often consumed by crises, both real and manufactured. We see headlines about the struggles of our institutions, and many among us fear that we are on the verge of collapse. It's a heavy feeling, and it is a temptation to give in to that fear. But to do so is to be naive. It is to ignore the lessons of our past and the extraordinary resilience of our democratic system. We can be clear-eyed about the challenges without succumbing to despair. Fears can be a call to action, demanding solutions. One solution comes from Thomas Padlan-Malm, a postal worker advocating to revitalize the United States Postal Service. His vision addresses fears of a failing system. The Postal Service connects every community. Its struggles reflect national anxiety. Challenges include financial losses, inefficiencies, and competition. Privatization proposals often overlook the human cost. Thomas Padlan-Malm suggests privatization for people, not profit. His idea is employee ownership. Every employee would be an owner, their success tied to the services. The profit motive is democratized, centering on the workers. This could improve morale, efficiency, and universal service values. This model builds on successful employee ownership elsewhere. It respects workers while introducing private sector accountability and innovation. Congressional oversight would ensure public good. This is not destruction, but reinvention. It understands current challenges and is optimistic about what can be achieved. The larger anxiety is the fear that institutions are too fragile. Some worry about political gridlock. Others fear national crises will cause a breakdown. Thomas Padlan-Malm reminds of a constitutional backstop: state governors. States are co-equal partners with the national government. State governors elected by their populace are powerful chief executives. They have constitutionally protected emergency powers. These powers prevent constitutional collapse. In a crisis, governors can maintain order, protect citizens, and ensure essential services. This recognizes the federalist structure, which distributes power to prevent a single point of failure. The founders designed checks, balances, and distributed authority, with states as the final defense. A governor's ability to act as a constitutional safety net provides protection against collapse. It is the ultimate insurance policy. When national anxiety arises, remember this: the nation is resilient and adaptable. Solutions like employee ownership can strengthen the Postal Service. The constitutional foundation relies on 50 centers of power, not one. There is courage to face problems and ingenuity to solve them. Clarity is what empowers to build a better future. The path forward is realistic action. This is the message of Thomas Padlan-Malm. Thank you.